The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I don't know why I pictured something grand. Marble columns, cathedral ceilings, the kind of room where history gets made. What I got was drop-ceiling tiles, fluorescent lighting, and a wooden bench that creaked every time the judge shifted his weight. My brother was sitting 15 feet away from me, dressed in a suit I'd never seen before. And he wouldn't look at me. My father sat beside him. He looked at me the whole time. That was somehow worse. I remember thinking, this is how it ends, not with a fight in the driveway or a screaming match over the phone. In a room that smells like old carpet and copy paper, with a court reporter's fingers hovering over a keyboard. Let me back up. I was 26 when I started the company. It wasn't a glamorous origin story. I was sleeping on an air mattress in a studio apartment in Columbus, Ohio, working a data entry job during the day, and spending every night building a platform I believed in. It was a software tool for small logistics companies. The kind of businesses that move freight between regional warehouses, places too small to afford enterprise solutions, but too complex to run on spreadsheets. I'd worked for one of those companies right out of college. I knew exactly where they were bleeding time and money. I thought I could fix it. My father thought it was a hobby. You're not a programmer, he told me the one time I tried to explain it to him. We were at his kitchen table. My mother was making coffee. Neither of them looked at me the way I needed them to. You're a logistics coordinator. That's what you know? Stick to what you know. My brother, 3 years older, already a project manager at a civil engineering firm, said something that night that I've never forgotten. He didn't say it to my face. I heard it as I was putting on my coat in the hallway. He was talking to my father in a low voice. He's going to lose whatever savings he has and end up right back here asking for help. You watch. I drove home with the windows down even though it was November. Here's the thing about being told you're going to fail by the people who are supposed to believe in you. It doesn't crush you the way they think it will. It does something else. It goes quiet inside you, and that quiet hardens into something useful. I worked. I contracted out the parts I couldn't build myself. I found a developer named, well, it doesn't matter. I found good people. I bootstrapped for 18 months. I maxed out a credit card. I ate a lot of rice and beans. And I am not being dramatic when I say there were 2 weeks where I genuinely didn't know if I'd make rent. And then the platform worked. Not overnight. Not in a moment. But by the time I was 28, I had 11 paying clients. By 29, 43. By 30, the company had crossed into profitability, and I had brought on 2 employees. I had a real office, shared space, but still, I had health insurance. I had a savings account with a number in it that didn't make me nauseous. My father called to congratulate me. My mother sent flowers. My brother took me out to dinner and picked up the check and told me he'd always believed in me. I didn't correct him. I probably should have. But I was happy, and I wanted to stay that way. That was my first mistake. The second mistake came about a year later, when things got complicated with a contract and I needed a short-term capital injection to cover operating costs while a major client delayed payment by 90 days. It wasn't a crisis. These things happen, but it was a gap. I needed about $40,000 to cover payroll and vendor costs without touching the growth reserves. My brother offered to help. He said he had money sitting in a brokerage account earning nothing. He said $40,000 was fine, that family helps family, that he wanted to be part of the company's story. He wanted a small stake, 4%. We agreed on terms. I had a lawyer draw up a simple agreement. My brother signed it. I signed it. We had dinner after, and he gave a little toast about how proud he was of me. I felt, for the first time in years, like I had my family back. That feeling lasted about 14 months. It started with small things. My brother started asking questions he had no real right to ask, about revenue projections, about client contracts, about whether I had considered bringing in outside investors. I chalked it up to curiosity. He was a numbers guy. It made sense. Then he asked to see the financials, full access. Said he wanted to understand what his stake was actually worth. I showed him a quarterly summary. He wanted more. I gave him more. I told myself this was normal. This is what you do when someone has skin in the game. What I didn't know, what I had no way of knowing at the time, was that my brother had been talking to my father for months, not about how proud they were, about how much the company might be worth and how little of it they had. The first real signal came on a Tuesday in March. My attorney, the one who'd drawn up the original agreement, called me to say he'd been contacted by another law firm. They represented my father and my brother jointly. They were making a claim. I asked him what kind of claim. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, They're asserting that the $40,000 investment was actually a loan, and they're claiming you never repaid it. With interest and penalties, they're calculating you owe approximately $260,000. And they're also claiming a stake in the company's intellectual property based on a separate agreement they say was signed. I said, "What separate agreement?" He said, "That's what I'd like to know." I went home that night and sat in my car in the parking garage for 45 minutes, not crying, not panicking, just sitting there running the math on what was happening. My brother had a 4% stake. Real, documented, legally sound. My father had nothing, no agreement, no investment, no involvement in the company in any form. And there was no loan. There was never a loan. The document my attorney and I had drawn up was explicit. Equity investment, not debt. So they were fabricating something. The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. It was everything my attorney had described, plus more. They claimed my father had been an informal advisor to the company from its early days. They claimed he had contributed intellectual and operational guidance that had materially shaped the platform. They claimed a handshake agreement had existed since the beginning, entitling him to 12%. They had a document, signed, dated, that I had never seen before. My name was on it. I stared at my alleged signature for a long time. It was close, good enough to fool someone who wasn't looking but I knew my own handwriting. I knew the way I formed the letters. It wasn't mine. My attorney told me what I already understood. This was going to be expensive, time-consuming, and deeply unpleasant, and the other side had clearly prepared for it. What they hadn't prepared for was what I'm about to tell you. When I built the platform's core architecture in those early years, I worked obsessively, and I documented everything. Not because I was thinking about legal disputes someday, because I'm the kind of person who annotates their code. I leave timestamps. I write notes to my future self inside the files. It's a habit I picked up from a developer I admired, and I never dropped it. Every major build, every version, every significant update, I had it, locally and in cloud repositories with unbroken metadata trails. The dates didn't lie. The authorship flags didn't lie. The platform was mine, built from scratch, across years of documented work that predated my brother's involvement by a wide margin. The forged agreement was dated to a period when I had already been building for 16 months. 16 months of code commits, design files, vendor invoices, and client emails, all of which made the story my father and brother were telling mathematically impossible. But here's the thing about going to court. Being right doesn't mean you win. You still have to show up. You still have to stand there while someone says things about you in front of a judge that make your chest feel like it's filling with concrete. And my family knew that. They were counting on me not having the resources to fight. What they miscalculated was how angry I was. The hearing came on a gray morning in October. My father arrived with my brother and 2 attorneys. They came in looking settled. The way people look when they've already decided how the story ends. My father wore a tie I recognized, the one my mother had given him for their anniversary years ago. I don't know why he chose that tie. I've thought about it since. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe he wanted to look like someone's trustworthy dad. I came in with my attorney, a banker's box of documentation, and 3 years of silence about to end. The judge was a quiet man, unhurried. He reviewed the filings without expression. When my father's lead attorney began presenting their case, the informal advisor claim, the handshake agreement, the alleged loan, the judge listened without interrupting. He made a note once, just once. Then it was our turn. My attorney began walking through the documentation, code repositories, timestamped design files, client correspondence that predated the signed agreement by over a year, vendor contracts in my name predating everything they claimed, and then the technical analysis. We'd had a forensic document examiner review the alleged agreement with my signature. The paper stock, the ink, the signature itself, compared to every verified document I had signed during that same period. The examiner's finding: the signature was inconsistent with my known signing patterns in 11 specific ways. The judge looked at the report. He looked at the original document. He looked across the courtroom. And then he asked one question. He didn't ask it to me. He leaned forward slightly, adjusted his glasses, and looked directly at my brother, who had been positioned as the primary witness to the alleged handshake agreement. The room went completely still. Even the court reporter seemed to pause. The judge said calmly, "Can you tell me, specifically, what operational guidance your father provided during the platform's first year of development, and when exactly that guidance occurred?" My brother opened his mouth, and nothing came out. Not immediately. There was a pause that lasted maybe 4 seconds and felt like 4 minutes. His attorney touched his arm. My brother looked at his attorney. His attorney gave a small, nearly imperceptible shake of his head. My brother said, "He advised on the general direction of the company." The judge said, "I see. Can you be more specific? A date, a meeting, a document, a deliverable, anything concrete?" Another pause. My father from the gallery made the smallest movement forward like he wanted to intervene. The judge glanced at him briefly, just once. My father sat back. My brother said, "It was more informal. Conversations over dinner, that kind of thing." The judge nodded slowly. He wrote something down. He looked at the alleged agreement one more time, then at the forensic report, then at the repository printouts my attorney had submitted. He didn't announce his decision that day. These things take time, and I want to be honest with you about that. Real legal proceedings don't have a single cinematic moment where the gavel drops and everyone goes home satisfied. There are follow-up filings. There are weeks of waiting. But something happened in that courtroom, in the silence after my brother couldn't answer the question. My father, sitting in the gallery, stopped looking at me. For the first time since I'd walked in, he looked down at his hands. I don't know what he was feeling. I used to think I could read him. I used to think I knew the difference between the version of my father who was disappointed in me and the version who was proud. I grew up studying that man's face like a weather map, learning which silences meant trouble and which ones were safe. But in that moment, I had no idea what was happening behind his eyes. And I realized, sitting there in that creaking wooden chair, that I'd spent my entire adult life trying to figure out a person who had just tried to take everything I built. The case was dismissed. The forgery file referred for further review. The equity agreement my brother had actually signed, the real one, was upheld. He retained his 4%, which by that point he probably wished he'd never asked for. My father's claim was thrown out entirely. There was no dramatic moment in the parking lot, no confrontation, no apology, no scene. My father and my brother walked out with their attorneys. I stood with mine by the car and he asked me how I was doing. I said I didn't know yet. He said that was a reasonable answer. My mother called me that evening. She had not been in the courtroom. I hadn't known she knew anything about it until that call. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't known what to do. She said a lot of things that I half heard, because by then I was very tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I told her I loved her. I told her I needed time. I took a lot of time. Here's what I want to say about family, now that I'm on the other side of this. I used to believe that blood meant something structural. That family was the one relationship you could take for granted, the one place you didn't have to prove yourself. I spent years chasing that. I swallowed things I shouldn't have swallowed. I made room for people who were measuring the space I was taking up and calculating whether they could take it from me. The company is still running. It's bigger than it was. I have people who work for me who've been there for years, who showed up for me when my own family didn't, who believed in the thing I built when the people who raised me thought it was a mistake. That's the family I live in now. I still think about the courtroom sometimes. Not the verdict, the question. The judge asked one specific, quiet, entirely reasonable question, and the person who had spent months constructing a case against me had no answer. Because you can forge a signature, you can fabricate a document, you can hire attorneys and wear the right tie and sit in the right chair and tell a story with enough confidence that you start to believe it yourself. But you cannot fake the details. You cannot invent, on the spot, the texture of something that never happened. And if the truth is on your side, if you documented your work, if you showed up every day, if you built something real, sometimes one question is all it takes.